It's time for the Splash Live from Civic Center TV, featuring stories from and about people like you in the greater West Bloomfield area. Simulcast on cable, 89.3 Lakes FM, social media, and the web. Now live from Green Media Center on Walnut Lake Road, it's the Splash Live.
Live, local, social, it's the Splash Live on Civic Center TV and 89.3 Lakes FM alongside Kevin McIntosh. I'm Tyler Keefe. Kevin, another great day ahead for us. We are now into the thick of things in spring and moving forward, and hopefully a great day ahead for everybody across the greater West Bloomfield area.
Yeah, Tyler, that spring term is a little debatable right now. There's still a jacket to be worn, a coat, I should say. But nonetheless, it's officially spring, and we are happy to be here, man. What's going on, Tyler?
Yeah, everybody in the spring spirit, and good to be with you as well. And as we get into the spring, we're getting closer and closer to that very important election season, as it always is. And whether it's the election information or it's other top stories happening throughout our local area, statewide, nationally, there's so much information out there, especially on the internet, that it's really easy to run into misleading information or even or misinformation or even disinformation that's targeted to confuse you about these stories that are out and about. So for many people that are maybe struggling by navigating the internet for all this info, they turn to other resources, including in our local communities and even at some of our local bookstores. Reporter Jake Schaff has the story.
We've heard a lot over the last few years about how misinformation and disinformation is affecting modern media, especially when it comes to politics. I had the chance to sit down with former U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan, Barbara McQuaid, who's currently a legal analyst with MSNBC. She just published her first book, Attack from Within, How Disinformation is Sabotaging America, which goes into detail on how disinformation is affecting our society, how it can be identified, and how we can fight against it.
One of the things I have seen in recent years is the growing threat of disinformation to our national security. And so I wanted to write an accessible book to help people understand what these tactics are so that we can identify them, name them, and defeat them. I think some of the things we're seeing today are some of the same strategies we've seen used by authoritarians of the past, Mussolini and Hitler and others. So, one of them is this idea of declinism. Society is bad, everything is bad, the country is not as good as it used to be, creating this sense of victimhood. And then to demonize others and scapegoat them and say, and the reason everything is so bad is these other people. And so driving a wedge between groups in society to amass power. In playing on fear, suggesting that the world is a very frightening place, and so to protect what we have and what is ours, we might need to resort to drastic means. I think speaking particularly in this election year, when no doubt there will be all kinds of disinformation bombarding us, trying to persuade us to vote in a certain way or to confuse us about voting, I think one of the things we can do is to seek out accurate information by looking to credible sources. So when it comes to voting, looking at the Secretary of State's website or the League of Women Voters websites. These are nonpartisan groups that will give you accurate information minus any spin whatsoever.
What role do you see the government playing in combating disinformation, and what specific measures would you recommend?
I think the government has a big role to play here. Of course, we are all the government, and we need the political will to address some of these things. So one is regulating social media. There are computer programs that deliberately drive content to us that's designed to generate outrage. And so the algorithms are something we could regulate. We could either prohibit these kinds of algorithms designed to manipulate us, or at least require their disclosure. I think another thing we could do is to have some reforms to the way our campaigns are financed. One of the things that we're seeing online is no requirement to disclose who's paying for the ads. So even if special interest has an unlimited number on what they can pay for, at least we could see who they are with some changes in the law. We could also have one more requirement online, and that is to prohibit the use of anonymous accounts. Anonymous accounts are what allow people to pose as people they are not and fool others. The use of bots online to amplify amplify the popularity of messages. If we could prohibit that and people had to actually be verified, I think that would go a long way towards stopping the lies and the meanness that we see online. I think some of these things are government regulations that we would need to do. Some require acts of Congress, but some of the things we really have the power to do ourselves. All of us could do a better job of learning media literacy ourselves, to identify second sources, to look at a story and not just the headline before we pass it on. But I think the most important thing is we need to choose for ourselves our commitment to truth. I think that in today's polarizing age, all of us are very willing to just argue the position of our side rather than looking for compromise, looking for nuance, and trying to find a way forward. We have to be more concerned about solving problems than we are about winning.
With all the information that's out there across several different platforms, it's more important than ever that we are all well-informed media consumers. For Civic Center TV, I'm Jake Schaff.
Appreciate that story from Jake Schaff. And Kevin, it's really important that, especially in the times that we're in now, not regardless of what side of the aisle you're on or where you fall on one issue versus the next, that we are literate media consumers. And that doesn't just mean that we can read what we're seeing online. It means that we understand what good sources are. We understand where we can get quality information that, if it has an angle, we can find multiple angles for. We can find multiple sides of that story. And, it comes down to media literacy. That story from Barbara McQuaid, who's got so much experience in this realm as a former U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan under multiple presidents, President Obama, a Democrat, and President Trump, a Republican, also a legal analyst at MSNBC and NBC, and a professor from practice in U of M Law School, an expert of sorts in our communities on finding good information and using that in a way that helps inform people in our communities.
Yeah, I loved everything that she was speaking on. From her experience, you would think that she was coming from an objective perspective also. But I was just having this talk with a friend and a family member about making sure you have a filter on the content that you're consuming online and the information that you're spreading. You don't want to just spread information just because it has a big headline or because it has a lot of people reacting and engaging to it. You want to make sure it's coming from a credible source and make sure, things are accurate in that information. So, no, I love everything that she was talking about. I might have to go ahead and get a copy of that book myself.
Yeah, and it was really cool to have her right here in our community. She was just down the road from us on Orchard Lake Road at the new location of Schuler Books here in West Bloomfield Township. Plenty more author visits there all throughout the year. And so if you have a chance to go over there and meet some of our great authors from the local area and coming in from all around the state of Michigan, West Bloomfield is now a destination for that kind of stuff. Kevin, West Bloomfield also has a rich history and has some big historical connections to the city of Detroit and other areas throughout Oakland County. And as the Historical Society celebrates its 50th anniversary, we want to take a look at one of the hallmarks of our community, the West Bloomfield Trail. This is one of the favorite amenities for Greater West Bloomfield residents, but it has some big ties to all of our local area. And the Historical Society, just a little while ago, put together many videos to detail the history of this trail at various points and the origin of that trail itself in our local area. Let's take a look.
For over 130 years, railroad locomotives thundered through this beautiful countryside. The Michigan Airline Railroad was completed in 1884, a branch of the historic Grand Trunk Railroad, which became a vital shipping network between manufacturing centers of the automobile industry. As the railway was abandoned, the original tracks were torn up and the natural corridor was preserved. The West Bloomfield Trail, ahead of which starts here, marked by this wayside sign, runs about 7 miles from West Bloomfield all the way up to Sylvan Lake, offering a beautiful natural enrichment and enhancement to the community.
And it really is, Kevin. You talk to anyone in the community, especially in West Bloomfield Township, where West Bloomfield Parks operates and maintains this trail. It is a fan favorite. It is such a cool trail. Runs, as Corey said in that video from the Greater West Bloomfield Historical Society, for 7 miles throughout our community.
Yeah, that seems pretty nice. The history behind it, and then it's obviously a nice trail, a popular trail, something to get out on and enjoy. You got to enjoy the scenery, especially where we are in the Greater West Bloomfield area. Yeah, that's good to hear. That's great information, man.
Yeah, Kevin, I know one thing about you that I've learned in our few weeks together so far on this program. You love to get the pulse of the people. And you know what? As more people are getting outside, getting active over the course of the summer, we're going to definitely see you out on that West Bloomfield Trail and get you a chance to see the beauty that is upon it.
Oh,
But,
man.
Kevin, as you navigate down that trail, there's also some trinkets of past history still in place on that former railway network in our community, including the steps that you may see leading up to what is currently the Greater West Bloomfield Historical Society's Orchard Lake Museum right on the campus of Orchard Lake City Hall. But those steps aren't just a nice landmark to explore something new or a place to stop and take a quick seat. They actually have a unique historical purpose that also ties back to the railway network.
The trolley system made it easy to travel the lakes of Oakland County. In the early 1900s, people got off or waited at platforms specifically built to access the train tracks. The Detroit United Railway purchased land from local farmers to build more tracks and more waiting platforms. Taxes on this property forced the railway to charge high fares, eventually leading to the demise of the trolley system. Here, where Long Lake crosses the parallel tracks of the Detroit United Railway and the Grand Trunk Railroad, are stairs similar to those that people use to get on and off the trolleys.
Again, that video from the Greater West Bloomfield Historical Society. And Kevin, the trail, not only a landmark amenity for West Bloomfield Township, as we said it earlier on, it travels 7 miles all throughout the Greater West Bloomfield community. It starts off in West Bloomfield Township, but goes all the way into our Tri-Cities through Orchard Lake, Keego Harbor, and the prettiest little city in Michigan, in Sylvan Lake, where the former railway played a pretty big role in building those communities.
Yeah.
Cass Lake was a quiet paradise for farmers and merchants until the Grand Trunk Railroad, which used to run right along this trail, started bringing weekenders up from Pontiac and Detroit to the area. In 1912, real estate developer Joseph Sawyer began selling off lots on the lake and Orchard Lake Road, bringing in new residents, primarily factory workers and skilled tradespeople working for the landowners, resorts, and merchants of the area. Keego Harbor officially became a city in 1955 at the intersections of Cass Lake and Orchard Lake roads. Today, it remains a gateway to the many attractions of Oakland County's lakes.
Yeah, that is what's so cool about this West Bloomfield Trail and these videos put together by the Greater West Bloomfield Historical Society. They've done such great stuff over the years, celebrating 50 years of preserving our history, including that historical connection between those that had lived in the city of Detroit and came out to Keego Harbor and came out to Sylvan Lake for vacation homes or to send their kids out to the Detroit Free Press Fresh Air Camp back in the day. They all went down that current West Bloomfield Trail that now has those historical way markers all throughout the trail that you can learn more information about our local history and one of our favorite local amenities. You can also do that and engage in more great programming from our friends at the Greater West Bloomfield Historical Society on their website, gwbhs.org. Speaking of making history, the West Bloomfield girls varsity basketball team continues to be on a tear in playoff season. Last night at the University of Detroit Mercy's Callahan Hall, they had the quarterfinal matchup for a chance to qualify to play in the state semifinals, and they won that game big. Final score last night, 54-32 over Temperance Bedford. Now they're on a crash course for these ladies from Rockford, a team they have a lot of recent history with over the past couple of seasons. Joining us for a preview of the semifinal coming up on Friday at 2 p.m. is the head coach of the West Bloomfield Lakers girls varsity basketball team, Darren McAllister. Coach, thank you for being with us, and congratulations on another trip to East Lansing. Yeah, and glad to have you on to talk about this because this was an interesting matchup last night. It's very similar to a couple games ago in the regional semifinal where you went up against a team that with a couple of losses that's had a lot of success against very talented teams in Detroit Renaissance. That very much was the case too with Temperance Bedford, but from the jump, your Laker girls were taking care of business, and that really began with defense, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That our defense is our identity, and the good part about it is, we've been here before. I will say we started out a little sloppy the first few plays, but I had to call an early timeout just to let them know and just settle down, guys. We've been here before. This is nothing new, and we're prepared for this moment.
And it showed on the court after that timeout. The Lakers then going back out in the final 6 minutes or so of the quarter, dominating Temperance Bedford and coming to an end of the first quarter score of 17-1. Now, the second quarter was a little bit different, but that's the difference with your team and so many other teams. You got the veteran talent that's been there before, and you got some of the top players in the state. Coach, take a step back and talk about the play of Summer Davis this season. Recently named the Gatorade Player of the Year for the state of Michigan for 2024, and she's been extra motivated really all throughout this season and leading back to the heartbreaking loss at the Breslin Center last year. How critical has Summer been, and especially her leadership, to getting this team back to this point?
Summer's a phenomenal player. She brings a lot to the table. She's the engine to get this team going. You mentioned she's playing with a chip on her shoulder. She absolutely is playing with a chip on her shoulder. As many accomplishments as she's accomplished, there was one just recently, this basketball that for some reason the voters didn't exercise their right to vote for her. But me knowing Summer's going to go out there and make them realize that they made a big mistake.
Yeah, and she definitely is. Last night, Summer Davis leading West Bloomfield with 26 points against Temperance Bedford to help your team qualify for the state semifinals. And Coach, it's been interesting because these last few years, there's been so many parallels between your 3 seasons with the West Bloomfield Lakers and even dating back before that. Just before you got the job as the head coach in 2019 and 2020, and then in 2021, they were ousted in the playoffs by Heartland, a 9-point loss. Then it was the pandemic year. There was no playoffs. And then your first season, you win the semis over Rockford by 3 points. You win the state title over that same Heartland team that last knocked the Lakers out by 9 points in the final. Fast forward to last year, you got a state title loss by just 4 points to Rockford. And now this year, you get back to the state semifinals once again on a crash course to play against Rockford. Having that familiarity with these other programs, I would imagine there are some benefits to that for your team, but also some drawbacks because a lot of their girls are also very experienced and have been on that team for a while and can get up to speed and are pretty up to speed with the Lakers.
Well, it's certainly a benefit. The benefit is like you said, we've been there before. We know what to expect. I don't think it's a drawback. Our players are truly competitors. And at the end of the day, we felt like that we left some hardware in East Lansing, and we got to go back and get that.
Yeah, 2 years ago, the West Bloomfield Lakers came home with the main trophy, the state title trophy. Last year, the state runner-up trophy coming back to West Bloomfield. This year, they're looking to take home the big hardware again. West Bloomfield 25-1, Rockford 26-1 on a crash course for 2 p.m. Friday at the Breslin Center. We will do our best to have our coverage out there throughout the day on our YouTube page at Civic Center TV and on Facebook at Civic Center TV 15, as well as right here on our website on civiccentertv.com. Head coach Darren McAllister from the West Bloomfield Lakers girls varsity basketball team is with us on the Splash Live today. And after that game, now that you've qualified, you've made it into the state semifinals, you're going up against Rockford again. How did that play in the locker room when your team found out that their matchup in the semifinals is going to be that same Rockford team that ultimately ended their season on a disappointing note in second place a year ago?
Well, Tyler, I would love to tell you that with them finding out that it was Rockford, that they got excited. But the reality is it's not about Rockford. It's about us bringing home that hardware that we felt as though we left in East Lansing last year. So Rockford just happened to be one of the blocks, the stumbling blocks along the way. But it's not about Rockford. It's about Rockford and whoever comes after that. We got to go. We got to get back up to East Lansing. We got to get something.
Yeah, 2 more games to bring home that hardware that everyone is seeking. And Coach, that experience you talk about, that you've said it time and time again in our conversation today and over the past several weeks as we've led into what's now coming up, state finals weekend at the Breslin Center in East Lansing. Your team's been here before. They know what this is like. They understand the pressure. They understand being under the big lights with all the eyes on their team, and they understand what it takes to bring home a title, being that you've had so many players on your team in leadership roles that have both won the title and lost the title. How does that help get the rest of your team ready as some of them go to East Lansing for this experience for the first time in the biggest games of some of their basketball careers?
Well, the beautiful part about it is we have players that have been there, and they've really taken the leadership role of preparing those other players for it. So right now, everybody's pretty excited. The younger players, they've been infused with the ideal of, hey, getting there, and performing when your number's called. So we're ready.
More information on the West Bloomfield Lakers girls varsity basketball team can be found in a couple of places on the West Bloomfield Athletics website, westbloomfieldathletics.com. And you can also find them on Twitter. Follow them at WB State Champs. That ultimately is the goal. And Coach, I want to take one more moment to talk about another player on your team that's played such a critical role, especially in the paint and especially defensively over the last several games, in Kendall Hendricks, because she's had such a wild career back and forth over the years at West Bloomfield High School. Injuries have kept her out. She wasn't able to play in that state title game. Last year, getting back, having that full season and coming up in the heartbreak of that state championship, and then having a really solid senior year. Talk about her impact on this team wearing the Laker 11 in 2024.
Well, she's been a tremendous asset. Kendall is one of those players that really understands what it's like to have something that you love taken away from you and you can't do it anymore. And to get it back, she's really just said, hey, you know what? Now I have it back. I want to compete at the highest level, and I want to take my team to the championship and bring home that hardware. And she's been an integral part in it. She's working hard in practice, working hard in the games, and she's just been a phenomenal teammate.
Well, Coach, we are excited to be out there with the team and cover what hopefully is another historic run, bringing home that big trophy back to West Bloomfield where it belongs on Saturday. But first, they got to get through Rockford on Friday afternoon, 2 p.m. tip-off at the Breslin Center, mhsaa.com for more information and for other ticketing information and more localized info on how you can get tickets and access to the game, westbloomfieldathletics.com. Coach McAllister, before we let you go, anything else that you'd like to say about this team or say to Laker Nation as we get ready to follow along with you to East Lansing on Friday and Saturday?
Well, I just want to tell Laker Nation, get your camouflage and your popcorn ready. It's time.
Plenty of popcorn on that concourse at the Breslin Student Events Center in East Lansing. And the camo, all coming fresh from West Bloomfield. Coach, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having us. Have a good morning.
You as well. WB State Champs on Twitter, westbloomfieldathletics.com. And again, 2 p.m. tip-off at the Brez on Friday. The Lakers going dancing in East Lansing for some March Madness girls basketball action in Division I. So glad to have Coach McAllister on with us, Kevin, because this team has really galvanized the entire community over the last several years. Their success on the basketball court, I know, has been inspiring to the boys basketball team, and especially in the year we're in right now with a renaissance of women's basketball across the world. We're not unfamiliar to that here in West Bloomfield. We've had that revolution here, and it's only growing now with the times that we're in.
Tyler, let me tell you, I am so fortunate to literally join a team that's covering two of the best teams in high school basketball in the state of Michigan, with Orchard Lake St. Mary's winning their state championship in Division I, and now with the West Bloomfield Lakers girls varsity basketball team. I'm happy to be a part of it. I'm happy to capture it. I just want to hope. I just hope I get a copy of the ring at the end of the season. That's all I want.
I'm over here. I'm shaking in excitement. When I saw last night that West Bloomfield had won, I was happy for them. When I saw that Rockford had won, that was just such a great story because, and I even tweeted this out last night. They lost to Heartland in 2020 in the playoffs by 9 points. They didn't have a playoff in the 2020-2021 season because of COVID-19, shuttered the season on March 17th. That was their final game. Then they come back the next year. They win in the semis over Rockford by 3 points, the team that then beat them in the finals the next year by 4 points. And then of course, on the way there, in their finals win, they beat that same Heartland team that knocked them out. So there's so many parallels. There's so many callbacks, so much history going into this game, and it's going to be a really interesting matchup with another great team in Rockford. They played excellent ball last year. They don't look as physically imposing as these West Bloomfield girls even a year ago, but they play aggressive. They shoot the ball really well, and Grace Lyons, their point guard, was the key player in that final. She didn't score the ball all game until a consequential 3-point shot that gave Rockford the lead at the end of that game last year. And so a really interesting matchup coming up on Friday night, Kevin. But not only some renaissances on the basketball court, some changes happening in our schools as well, particularly coming forward when it comes to standardized testing.
No, absolutely. A lot has changed since we've been in high school. People like of my generation, a lot has changed. But one thing specifically that has changed is the fact that now they are taking the SATs nationwide, all digital. And joining to talk about it a little bit more, West Bloomfield High School Assistant Principal, Dr. Stephanie Clark. Dr. Clark, how do you feel like an all digital SAT will change the testing landscape for students?
So I'll say similar to you, that's how I took the SAT and ACT. It was in the gym, it was paper pencil, everyone was in there and you took the test. But now moving to the digital format, I think this is going to benefit students in school districts alike. Right now, with our district, we have one-to-one student technology. So our students are really familiar with working with the student Chromebooks, and they use them every day. So that transition should not pose any difficulty. Also, College Board has what they call the digital readiness assessment. So this helps students get acclimated with the platform and the program that they'll be using. On my end, as the test coordinator for my building, we used to get tons of boxes, like hundreds of boxes of materials, and we would have to sort those tests, group those tests per rooms, and it was a labor-intensive effort. But now that we are able to do those tests online, it at least eliminates that part of the heavy lift for us for testing.
Okay, so as somebody that's considered from the old school of testing nowadays, I guess that's what it is. I got a lot of questions. So how are we ensuring that they aren't cheating? I see that they can use their own device or go to a certain institute to actually take this test. How do we know that they're not cheating? They have internet access, right?
So College Board has built in a lot of parameters to make sure that the students are not pulling up additional screens while they're testing or utilizing, information on their desk. Also, one thing that I should point out is that the proctor student coverage has not changed. So you'll still be in the room with another adult that is actively monitoring those computers. And if you were to, per se, go outside of the test day platform, it would get an alert. And then that test would likely be considered spoiled. So they have parameters built in to know what the students are doing while they're on their computer.
I hate that I sound so old with this and so rebellious, but it just seemed like it's just no possibility. Well, okay, so you say this makes it easier. I see that the electronic digital SAT is 1 hour shorter than the standard test. So, I mean, are the questions easier? Are there fewer questions? What changes do you know have been made to the actual test?
So there are fewer questions, but it's the same areas that are being tested. Part of students' aversion, parents' aversion sometimes, and really teachers' aversion to standardized testing is obviously it's an interruption to the standard teaching day and the standard curriculum. But also students sometimes feel that they are getting fatigued by the volume of tests that they have to take, especially if you're an 11th grader. You're taking the SAT, you're taking ACT work keys as well as MSTEP. So that's a pretty labor-intensive testing schedule. So I think that making the test shorter makes that less fatiguing for the student and forces the test to focus on what are the most important essentials that students need to be tested on. So I think the shortened test schedule is good.
Okay. I mean, it would make sense that, a shorter test will be a little bit easier for everyone, shorter time. Okay, I understand that. But in the sense of college admissions, like a lot of colleges, since the pandemic at least, have changed their standards. Some colleges don't even allow this. Are you seeing less enrollment for SAT and ACT test taking, or has it increased? Has it been moderate? What are your thoughts on that?
So there's this ideology that's going around that making tests optional is actually going to increase greater access for acceptance into colleges. The goal with that is that a student might have excellent grades, excellent extracurriculars, but testing might not be their strong suit. And having tests score optional admissions allows the student to say, this is not the best assessment of my skills right now, so I'm not going to send that score in. I'm going to let the rest of my resume speak for me. So in that regard, it does provide more access because students that traditionally aren't good test takers are being admitted into universities that otherwise they might have been excluded from because of a low test score. There's actually an article in Education Week that stated that about 60% of students have not shared scores with colleges. So that hasn't hurt their chance of acceptance. So this might be a new way.
Yeah, that is interesting. I went to Eastern Michigan and had to share mine. I didn't have a super proud ACT or SAT score, but nonetheless, I got accepted and it got me to where I wanted. So I think just whatever gets me probably at the minimum level at anything, whatever gets me to the next level is probably what they're going to do, and they probably will do not too much more than that. But join us, we have Dr. Stephanie Clark, assistant principal for the West Bloomfield High School, talking about the new SATs nationwide going to an all digital format. Now, we know that students nowadays in the month of March and April are taking the SATs and ACTs to get into colleges. Have you all started that process, and have you started a digital? What's your process to it? And if you haven't, what is going to be your process going into it?
So we happily signed up for the digital testing experience. Like I said earlier, moving to digital take a lot of the load off as far as organizing the test and getting those boxes and shipping them back and packing them accurately. Like, it eliminates that for us. One of the things that our district is already light years ahead is we have one-to-one technology for our students already. So at the beginning of this school year, when we knew for a fact that we were moving to the digital platform, we reached out to the technology department to make sure that all of the student Chromebooks had the College Board test day application on there. We made sure that our district infrastructure could handle the volume of students that would be online at one time. And they actually require at College Board that we have someone called a technology coordinator, and they provide them training. We actually have 2 technology coordinators that have taken the training just in case on one day that technology coordinator is unavailable or life happens. So we have actually been preparing for this since the beginning of the school year and have finished all of our training and are ready to go. And like I said, they provide a digital readiness assessment for the students, and our students will be taking those assessments in their advisory classes during the month of March so that they are ready to go without issue or incident on the test day.
Great to hear. Yeah, and it seems like you are crossing your T's, dotting your I's when it comes to that. You said 2 technical or technicians that'll be there on hand. When you're dealing with technology and the internet, it's best to have at least 2 people as a backup. So I completely understand that. Now, we can go back and forth about our thoughts on it. But what about the current students' thoughts and their reactions to this news? Have you had any words from the actual current students? And what about students who've graduated? Have you heard anything about them? Do they feel like this is a stab in the back? Like they were treated a little bit different? Any word from the students?
So I haven't heard from our students that have graduated already. And our current students, they're on technology every day. So this hasn't disrupted anything for them. They're like, what's one more online thing that we do? I think ultimately, you have students that love standardized testing and they would be fine taking this test pencil paper or online. And you have other students that, it's a test. So whether it was paper, pencil, or online, it wouldn't be their preference. But I think that the majority of the students, since they were born into this society where technology was readily available, this doesn't shake them up. This is just more par for the course.
It would make sense that they would just get right along with it. It's another thing, like you said, on their phones or on their tablets, computers.
Correct.
Oh, it's cool. It's more screen time, essentially, so I get it.
Right.
Any last words, parting words, important information for the greater West Bloomfield community before we part, Dr. Clark?
I would just say that the first time utilizing anything, you always have to expect room for error. So this is College Board's first time rolling out this digital option. This is our first time utilizing this digital option. Although College Board has prepared us and although we have prepared as a district, we always leave room that there might be some opportunities for growth for the next year. So I'll just say be patient with us and join us for the ride. We're looking forward to spring testing.
There it is. Thank you so much. Talking about the all-digital ACT, SAT going around nationwide. We have Dr. Stephanie Clark, assistant principal from Greater West Bloomfield High School. Excuse me. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yes. And thank you again, Dr. Clark, talking about this all-digital format. If I'm not mistaken, I believe she said the students were feeling overwhelmed and exhausted by taking so many different tests and standardized tests around that time. And I'm like, what do you know about exhaustion? You're not really working hard. You know who really works hard? Our caregivers. And specifically, we have an event coming up for local caregivers to kind of give them a day off that they actually deserve. Joining us to talk about that, we have Senior Adult Services Director of Gesture Human Services, Debbie Benoni, joining the Splash Live. Thank you, Debbie, for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. First and foremost, thank you for putting on this event for our caregivers in the community. Can you tell us more about the inspiration behind a day off for caregivers and what motivated you to create the opportunity for self-care?
Absolutely. So I run a dementia-specific adult day program. It's called the Dorothy and Peter Brown Jewish Community Adult Day Program. It's a partnership between Gesture Human Services and Jewish Senior Life. So we have 2 locations, and we spend our entire day working with people who are experiencing brain changes and their loved ones. And we know that caregivers tend to have more health problems than the person they care for because they are so focused on taking care of someone else that their own needs kind of fall to the way. So we were very lucky that we have this funder who's very focused on caregivers. It's the Dee Dee and Michael Perlman Caregiver Fund, and they have supported us in throwing a day off for caregivers where we provide respite for them. So we take care of their loved one while they come to us and have a day that is just all about them.
Nice. See, and this is why I have to applaud you. When I saw this, I've never seen anything like this. Like, what is this? That's why I'm glad I have you here to explain it. Because the event also, like you said, provides professional care to loved ones living with dementia at the Brown Center. Can you elaborate on the specialized care and the support that will be provided to ensure their safety and comfort while the caregivers get their much needed break?
Absolutely. So that's what we do every day. We have a day program Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. specifically geared towards people who are living with dementia. So our whole environment, the building and everything within the building is set up with that acknowledged. So all of our staff have gone through extensive training on how to approach people with dementia, how their brains are changing, what activities are more engaging. And we are very focused on person-centered care. So if someone's not enjoying one thing that's going on, we have another opportunity for them to participate in. It's all about choice and acknowledging where a person is in their dementia journey. So on the day off for caregiver, we're going to have what would be a typical Brown Center day, which includes a lunch. It includes music specialists coming in to engage. It includes games. We have a yoga specialist coming in. So people will be able to get their bodies physical and their minds active.
Great. Yeah, joining us now to talk about a day off for local caregivers, Senior Adult Services Director, Debbie Benoni of Gesture Human Services. Once again, I love this. This is people taking care of the people who take care of people. And self-care is so crucial, specifically for caregivers. And even people in the healthcare field, they can feel guilty or hesitant to prioritize their own well-being, like you said. They can feel like, I don't want to take a day off, like they need me here, they're understaffed or whatever the case may be. Can you just talk about how you encourage caregivers to overcome these feelings and embrace the opportunity to recharge themselves?
Absolutely. So one thing that we try and remind them, it's like riding on an airplane. If you don't put on your own oxygen mask before putting on someone else's, you're of no use to anyone else. So one of the things that we try to say is, In order to be a better caregiver, you have to acknowledge your own needs and take care of yourself. Another
Correct.
thing that we try to emphasize is when we give people this day off, they're not leaving their loved one. They're giving their loved one an opportunity to engage and socialize and have a great day. So you don't need to have that guilt in taking care of yourself because they're taking care of themselves as well.
Correct, correct. I love what you started with. That's the same thing I like to say. It translates into you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to have something in your tank in order to give to someone else. Yeah, that was a great example that you started with. Can we just give out more official information? We know the event is April 7th, which is a Sunday, 10:30 to 3 p.m. Soul Cafe, West Bloomfield. Are there any costs? How do you register? Is it first come, first serve? Like, can you just give more information on how our caregivers can get involved or, participate?
Absolutely, absolutely. So as you mentioned, the event is Sunday, April 7th. It takes
Mhm.
place at 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. at Soul Cafe. That means it's at 10:30. That means we're opening the Brown Center for arrivals from 10 a.m. and then pickup will be by 3:30 p.m. Anybody
Okay.
that wants to attend can call our social worker. Her name is Sherilyn Rowe, and her phone number is 248-592-5032. And we do like people to call and register because we want to understand who you are and who your loved one is so that we can best provide for them while they're with us. And we do have limited space. So I do ask that people reach out as soon as they can. We'll try and fit as many people in as possible that we can. If you're uncomfortable about bringing your loved one, you can still come to the day off without dropping off your loved one, but that is an option. We will provide respite. And
Okay.
I'm glad to say there is no cost for this event at all, thanks to the Dee Dee and Michael Perlman Caregiving Fund.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you. Great contribution to our local caregivers in the greater West Bloomfield community. Thank you again. We have Debbie Benuni, Senior Adult Services Director for Gesher Human Services here in West Bloomfield. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, yes, absolutely. We love to acknowledge the people taking care of the people who are taking care of the people. Now, it seems kind of complicated, but ultimately, we are taking care of the what I call our healthcare workers, and they are very, very important to our community because I mean, I don't know if anyone else knows people who work in hospitals, but nursing and other types of fields within the hospital are kind of short on staff. So it's very, very important to take care of them, Tyler.
It is, and they do incredibly critical work for us across all of our different communities. For people that are in need, and those that are in need of a caregiver need someone that is dedicated to them effectively 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to provide them with quality care and with tender, loving care also to keep their quality of life as best as is possible. So, of course, we definitely celebrate our local caregivers and wish them nothing but a ton of fun on that day, Caregivers Day off. As we get into the spring, we're getting closer and closer to tax time, which means many of you may be working with a tax preparer or working yourself to get your taxes ready to send to the IRS and to the state of Michigan. But with opportunities to take care of your taxes with other people helping you out, there's also opportunities for scammers to take advantage of people across our communities. Here to help us navigate around potential scams during tax season is Nakia Mills, the Director of Marketing for the Better Business Bureau of Detroit and Eastern Michigan. Nakia, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show because this is an important time of the year for people. They're getting all their information together. They're dotting their I's. They're crossing their T's. They're working potentially with tax preparers for critical information and with that, a lot of really personal information that's going to be out and about this time of the year to make sure that they're able to file their taxes. With that, we have scam artists that are always looking for the best opportunities at the best time. So when we get to tax time, Nakia, what are some of those common ways we see scammers start to target tax preparers and individual tax filers?
The truth is, they kind of switch it up every year, but we see the same themes, just, they reinvent themselves with a new twist. Those scammers do that, right? One of the top ones, as we all know, people like to try to impersonate the IRS. So you might get a phone call or a letter saying that, oh, you have this refund, but we can't give it to you until we get your personal information. So beware of those, because once you give that personal information, you discover there is no extra refund. They just are trying to get your information so they can steal your money or possibly pretend to be you and file taxes if you haven't filed them already. So that's one of the big ones. And then there's, of course, tax ID theft, which is why we tell everyone file early as you can. Because some scammers, if they somehow already got a hold of your social security number, will file taxes and then they get your refund. So then when you file, you get a letter from the IRS saying, hey, this number has already been filed under the social security number. So those are two of the big ones. And then, of course, there's phishing, right? We all know the phony emails where it's a bogus website that they get you to click on saying maybe, oh, you e-filed, but we need you to update your information. Just click this link. Those are kind of the biggest ways. And then, of course, there's the threatening. If you owe the IRS and you're not expecting your refund, you might get the call from an impersonator, even threatening you with jail if you don't pay them on the spot during that phone call.
And these scammers, that particularly those that are targeting people with unsolicited communications, those threatening phone calls, like you said, threatening jail time, or saying you have a fine you have to pay and you have to pay it right now or we're coming to get you. They often take a couple of tactics that should immediately be red flags, particularly some of the ways they're trying to collect those funds.
Yes, one thing you'll notice, the real IRS isn't going to force you on the spot at this moment, or we're sending, the FBI or cop to your door. So that's a real red flag. As soon as you hear that pressure that, oh, you must do it right now, or it's some excessive threat that doesn't even seem realistic. And then there's also, just pay attention to, on websites or in person, grammar and how are you being contacted. The IRS is not contacting you through text. They're not going to contact you through social media. They're not asking for personal information over the phone. So just be very careful and think about this type of communication. Is the IRS really going to try to reach me this way?
Yeah, it's all different things to consider, and there's so much great information out there for people in our communities to avoid these sorts of scams and so many others. If you're looking for information that's helpful during tax season or really any time of the year, or just to keep up to date on how scam artists are navigating, bbb.org is the website for the Better Business Bureau, and then you can navigate even to their Detroit page through their website for Detroit and Eastern Michigan, which is where we're being joined today from Nakia Mills, Director of Marketing for the Better Business Bureau of Detroit and Eastern Michigan on the Splash Live. And also a lot of people this time of the year, as they're filing their taxes, maybe they're doing it alone themselves, and that takes a lot of, like you would be doing with a tax preparer anyway, collecting a lot of documents, and those documents have your personal information on it, bank account information, student loan information, your social security number, maybe even other information like insurance. And so as you're sending those documents in, as you're preparing those documents to fill out those papers, what should you be doing with those documents that have all that personal information on it afterwards to dispose of it properly and protect your personal information in that way?
Why you said that word. Some of us lately, we don't safeguard our social security information. That number is so vital. So you said the right word, protect that information, shred it completely. Don't think, oh, I'm just going to crumble it up and smash it in my trash. You should use a real shredder, get that information put away. You don't want anyone to access those details. And I would add to, just because we do offer tips for people, we have a special site just dedicated to taxes at bbb.org/tax tips. And that information not only helps you learn about the scams, it gives you a lot more tools to avoid being scammed.
That's bbb.org/tax tips for more information. They'll have resources from all throughout the U.S. for filing your taxes and preparing for potential tax scams this time of the year, including an article that's right at the top of that page, Tips to Protect Yourself from Tax Scams, great ways to get information that you may need. And Nakia, also this time of the year, as we're talking about protecting that personal information, so many people, they don't want to go through the exhaustion of crunching the numbers and doing all the calculations and filling out the tax form, so they may use an expert or a tax preparer in order to help them with the process. But that comes with its own challenges and its own risks as well. So as people are looking for a tax preparer, or they're getting that information prepared to bring to an accountant, what should they be looking for? What should they be looking out for as they prepare to align with a tax preparer?
Right. That's something you have to be very careful in research, right? Because sometimes our friend might tell us that they know this person who does taxes and they can get you this great refund and they have this great price, but you have to be very careful. Make sure you're doing your research. Look them up on bbb.org in our directory. What are people saying? Search their name in general, just Google. Look on social media. Are people posting saying this person took their money and they never got a refund or their taxes weren't filed? Definitely make sure you do your research, search that name everywhere you can, especially if it's an individual and not part of an organization. I'm not saying all individual CPAs or tax accountants are bad, but you definitely want to do your research if it's a company or an individual by just looking them up in different channels to make sure there's no negative information out there about them.
And are there any sort of certifications or accreditations that people should be looking for also that may help them to navigate and weed out some of the potential bad actors?
It's kind of the same, similar, those red flags where if you feel like something might be too good to be true, they maybe are those types that are always promising a refund, right? All of us aren't always going to get a refund. So just be very careful if it's those kind that are, hey, just give us your money up front and we'll get you this huge refund, or we'll give you some money. Just be careful, because sometimes they'll try to reel you in because they really want your personal information more than they really plan to file your taxes for you. Sometimes people can get a fake tax preparer and they feed them all this information and then the tax preparer disappears. So just pretty much when you have that gut feeling, go with it. A lot of times it's just that simple. And so long as you do your research, and then if you hear your brain telling you be careful, listen to your brain.
And it's always best to err on the side of caution, especially when it comes to your personal information. And Nakia, as you're joining us from the Better Business Bureau, Nakia Mills, the Director of Marketing for the BBB of Detroit and Eastern Michigan, with us on the Splash Live. That's especially the case nowadays, where whether you're using a tax preparer's services, a CPA's services, or you're doing your taxes yourself, in many cases, a lot of this can and often is done online, which adds its own security risks too. What considerations should people be making as they're maybe preparing or filing their taxes on the web?
It's huge. You want to make sure it's the real website. We all know people now make these fake websites. They can steal that IRS logo, or maybe, a tax preparer, I won't say any names, but a popular tax preparer's logo, and make the site look just like that. And then you're typing your information into a fake site. So always look in the address bar and make sure when you click a link, because we might search, tax preparer online or even irs.gov, right? But sometimes people know how to hijack those links. And then when you click on it, you end up on their website. So make sure that address bar says you are where you thought you were supposed to end up. And then even once you're on that site, look for grammar. A lot of times these fraudsters have poor grammar. Sometimes they're not even from the US when they're doing these things. So a telltale sign, a lot of times you can tell that something's not quite right, because the government isn't using all these grammatically incorrect statements and a lot of pressure statements kind of rush you through the process to get you to enter your information. So those are some red flags when you're looking online. And make sure it's always secure. The real sites are going to have the HTTPS, showing that it's a secure website.
Yeah, that's all great information that you can find online at bbb.org/tax tips for more information on keeping yourself protected during tax preparation season. Of course, we know tax day coming up on April 15th, but so much time, energy, and a lot of personal information goes into that. Always important to keep up to date. Oakland County also on Facebook on their page at OakGov, providing some additional tips that lead to resources very similar to what was provided by the Better Business Bureau. All great places to go for information this time of the year as we're getting ready to file our taxes with the IRS and with the state of Michigan. Joining us on the Splash Live is Nakia Mills, the Director of Marketing at the Better Business Bureau of Detroit and Southeastern Michigan. Nakia, before we let you go, any lasting advice that we haven't discussed yet today that would be important for people to keep in their mind and consider as they're getting ready to put their taxes in?
Not even so much as they're getting ready. I feel like we covered those pretty securely, but I do want to point out to people because they freak out if they do think their identity has been stolen, if they do think they're a victim of tax fraud. The most important thing you can do is first put a fraud alert on your credit report, because this means someone has your social security number, So make sure that you go to either one of the three, Experian, TransUnion, Equifax. If you put that fraud alert on one account, the other two will also add that fraud alert to their service as well. So that's very important for people to know, because we don't want you to think if something does happen, we want to make sure you know what to do next. And you should also make sure you contact the FTC. That's just at ftc.gov/complaints. And also report it, with us on bbb.org/scam trackers. So hopefully people can understand what happened so that it doesn't happen to them.
Yeah, there are resources out there if you do notice that your identity has been stolen. I'm someone that has been through that process before, and one of those red flags that proved that to me was getting a letter back from the IRS, actually getting a tax return early when I had not filed taxes yet at all. And so taking those steps can be really important, as Nakia said, in order to protect yourself. If you do get a notice like that starts putting alarm bells off, there are protections that are in place, and a lot of those protections you can put in place before you would even potentially fall victim. Nakia, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you on, and thank you for your sage advice from the Better Business Bureau of Detroit and Eastern Michigan. You can find more information on tax tips and scam protection information and so much more for tax season specifically from the Better Business Bureau, bbb.org/tax tips. And also you can find a really great blog post by Oakland County in their Oakland County blog, oaklandcountyblog.com, navigating tax season safely, protecting yourselves from scams and cyber threats. Kevin, really important this time of the year. All this personal information that's out there, we're doing a lot of this stuff on the web, whether it's online banking or even our taxes. All this advice can apply not only to tax season, but really any time of the year.
No, real life applications with this. I'm sitting here thinking and learning, like I haven't filed my taxes yet this year. So now I'm thinking, wow, that probably did leave a window open for, if my information was out there, someone to potentially do it. So now I have to get on it. And then also just making sure we also check the grammar. I do that with my friends and my girlfriend all the time. If you spell something wrong, I want you to prove that you are a human. I'm gonna send you a picture and make you point out all the motorcycles.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to build a reCAPTCHA in your own life in some of these cases. But hey, before you CAPTCHA yourself first and check these things out with that great advice from our friends at Oakland County and the Better Business Bureau. Kevin, on a more serious note, this is Severe Weather Awareness Week, and we had a chance earlier on this week to talk to Kevin Sadage from Oakland County Emergency Management, as they're putting out a lot of information to help people get prepared for severe weather season, which could start as soon as today, or could start a few weeks from now with the first severe storm, but have a number of different effects on our community. As we get closer to the summer season, a lot of that has to do with severe thunderstorms and especially tornadoes as we go from cold to warm and then eventually back to cooler weather. So a great video from our friends at the National Weather Service to help you prepare in the event of a tornado, what you should do in your home. Let's take a look.
If your area is under a tornado warning, act now. You may only have a few minutes to get to safety. Seek shelter immediately. Go to a safe room, basement, storm cellar, or the lowest level in a sturdy building. If there is no basement, go to the center of the building and away from windows and doors. Put as many walls as possible between you and the outside. Get under a sturdy object like a table and cover yourself with pillows and blankets. Use your arms to protect your head and neck. A helmet can offer some protection too. If you are in a car, drive to a shelter immediately. If there isn't enough time and you are caught by extreme winds or flying debris, park the car as quickly and safely as possible out of the traffic lanes. Stay in the car with the seatbelt on. Put your head down below the windows. Cover your head with your hands and a blanket, coat, or other cushion if possible. Do not park under an overpass or bridge, and never try to outrun a tornado in an urban or congested area. If you are outside, find the lowest point on the ground and lie face down. Use your arms to protect your head and neck. And most importantly, watch out for flying debris. It causes most fatalities and injuries. Safety is job number one. Get weather ready.
Severe Weather Awareness Week, good time to get up to date on all the information you need to know in the case of severe storms or even tornadoes in our community. That's our show. Well, thank you for joining us and encourage you to always keep up to date on civiccentertv.com. Follow us on YouTube at Civic Center TV and on Facebook at Civic Center TV 15. For our entire team at Master Control and Kevin McIntosh, I'm Tyler Kieft. Thank you very much for tuning in to Splash Live.